Hello and welcome back to MLQ Replay. The 2025 regular season is in the books, and we're here to break down the last weekend of it, as well as a big selection to come in a few minutes. And I say we, but obviously I'm on an empty set here, down a few analysts. But we've got some great guests coming in. I'm excited to talk to all of them. It's going to be a more interview-heavy episode today, but I think it's going to be a great time either way. Before we get into the episode, I want to just explain a little bit for those who might be new to MLQ or just catching up on how the bracket is going to work this weekend at MLQ Championship. So we have 11 teams competing this weekend, and they're going to compete in two brackets. The initial bracket, which can be played Saturday morning into the early afternoon, and then the championship bracket that's going to start on Saturday late afternoon and continue through Sunday morning. In the initial bracket, 5 teams, 2 from the north, 2 from the east, and 1 from the south are going to be competing double elimination, with the last 2 standing moving on to the quarterfinals. With Austin not being able to compete at MLQ Championship, we could have just made it so that where they would have been in the bracket would have forfeited twice until they were eliminated. But when we did that, we realized that created a perverse incentive structure in the North Division, where the road would have been easier for the 4th place team in the North Division than the 3rd place team in the North Division. Because of that, we restructured things slightly. So the 2 teams that finished 4th in their divisions are going to play in the very first game, with the 3 teams that finished 3rd in their division waiting in the next round of the winner's bracket for the initial bracket. Once that's all played through, and you can see it both getting published on MLQ's social media in a few minutes, as well as on the MLQ Championship website. Once those 2 teams continue on into the quarterfinals, they're going to be met with 6 teams, the 3 first place teams from the divisions and the 3 second place teams from the divisions. Those 8 teams will play in single elimination best 2 out of 3 series until one team remains standing on Sunday afternoon. The way those 2 playing bracket teams go in is that New York, coming from the division that had the strongest season last season, will receive the team that comes out of the loser's bracket in the initial division, and San Antonio will receive the team that comes out of the winner's bracket. The only exception to that is if there are divisional considerations. If it is possible to avoid a divisional versus divisional matchup in that quarterfinals, that will take precedent over what I just said of New York getting the lower team and San Antonio getting the upper team. That's how we're going to create 2 of the quarterfinals, and they're going to be across the bracket from each other. The other 2 quarterfinals will be set in just a few minutes, because we are going to take the top 2 teams from the north, which is the Chicago Prow and the Minneapolis Monarchs, and they're going to be facing off with the 2 second-place teams from the other divisions, the Boston Forge and the Kansas City Stampede. It is up to Chicago as the first-place team to choose which side of the bracket they want to be on. Boston's going to be on San Antonio's side, while Kansas City is going to be on New York's side. That is how everything's going to break down this weekend across 2 pitches. We'll be live all day, both days on the MLQ Network right here on YouTube. We really hope that you're joining us in Buffalo, but if you're not, we hope you'll be tuning in along the way. With all that said, as I said, we have one decision left to finalize the bracket. And to make that decision, I'm going to bring in the head coach from the Chicago Prow, Kenny Murphy. Kenny, thanks so much for joining us tonight.
Yeah. Hi, Ethan.
So we ended up talking to Minneapolis after your guys' series last weekend, but I do kind of want to hear the Chicago side of things as well before we get into that decision. Obviously, a very tight series. You guys come out 3-0. How do you guys feel coming out of that series? I mean, talking to Joe Goulet, they kind of took it as much of a moral victory as you can get out of losing 3 games because the games were so close. Did you guys see it as, yes, we swept, but we could have done a little bit more?
I think for us, we have seen Monarchs continue to become a stronger team. They had a great roster coming in, and that is a series that we never take lightly. So for it to be very close is a benefit for the division, and the more competition we have, the better. With it being so close, I saw it as a positive of being able to start from so far behind and then make it through with a win. That was a good thing for our mindset, especially if someone gets a catch and you're behind and able to close it out through set score. So that was good. The games, of course, it's more stressful when it's tighter, but we learned so much from it going into the championship.
You guys obviously have been a talented team for a number of years, but you kind of have a embarrassment of riches in the quadball game right now, to a certain degree, with certain extra pieces, coming in this year. Players like Justin Cole, obviously, Riley Andrews returning. Naresh has had a bit all summer where he keeps forgetting that DME is even on your roster, and then just like, oh, I have him too. You obviously are experimenting with a lot of lines still, it seems, against Minneapolis. Obviously, the championship's now rapidly approaching. How do you guys feel about how that's all coalescing?
Yeah, we had one more weekend of practices between the Monarch series and champs. So we tried out a couple more things, and I'm sure what you see in our first series will change if we progress through the weekend. There are so many ways you can put the puzzle together, and it could be good, but we're trying to find that special combination.
All right, so let's move on to talking a little bit about the decision that you're here to make tonight. So obviously, you guys have the option of choosing the Boston Forge or the Kansas City Stampede, with knowing that on the Boston side, a potential semifinal against San Antonio awaits, and on the Kansas City side, a potential semifinal with New York. The first question is kind of how micro versus macro were you looking at this? Were you guys exclusively looking at the team you're going to be playing the quarterfinals, or were you kind of taking it as a whole, what it could mean for your tournament?
Yeah, we do consider the entire path it would take to get to the finals. Of course, if you're not confident in being able to beat that first team, then you should definitely pick the other side. But yeah, we did think about it as a whole of the side of the bracket.
You also obviously had the opportunity to face off against Boston last year in the semifinals. So kind of obviously you guys had a lot of success in that series. Did kind of the way that series go, was that something you were keeping in mind as you kind of were making this decision?
Not as much. I think their roster looks much different than it did last year. So I think that wasn't as much of a consideration as it may have been had they had a more similar roster.
So obviously you didn't have decisions to make last year, as you made your run. But anything that you learned from either that run or the run 2 years ago to the championships that kind of factored into the decision and kind of what it means to play through this tournament?
Yeah, both of our finals appearances the past 2 years were not particularly close. We lost quite a few people to injuries or just exhaustion. So knowing that, we did try to prepare our team better for that, leading like throughout the entire season. But that was also a consideration in the side that we picked.
So when you say a consideration side you picked, both obviously, being able to stay fresher, but is there any consideration to the physicality levels of the teams you might be playing? I mean, obviously everyone plays a slightly different style. A more physical team is just naturally probably going to lead to a few more, knocks here and there, even, if it's all done legally. So is that something you guys are considering at all?
Yeah, slightly. That wasn't a huge point of consideration, but it was in the back of my mind, definitely.
Awesome. Well, I think that's about all I have to ask about it. So I'll let you take it away, Kenny. Who are you guys selecting to play in the quarterfinals?
We are selecting the Kansas City Stampede.
Awesome. So with that pick, Chicago will slot in against Kansas City on the New York side of the bracket. That will put Minneapolis facing off against Boston on the San Antonio side of the bracket. Kenny, thank you so much for taking the time tonight. I'm very excited for this tournament. I'm very excited to see you guys perform at the tournament, and we'll all be watching Saturday.
All right, thanks.
Awesome. So with that decision out of the way, we did have one final series to take down to decide who was going to finish third in the North Division, who was going to finish fourth, with Detroit facing off against Cleveland. Cleveland obviously getting that series win against Toronto early in the season, kind of a big moment in their program history. Detroit obviously coming off a season where they finished second in the division, didn't want to see too much fall from that level. And Detroit did come in and took care of business in very comfortable fashion, at least in games 1 and 2, though pretty comfortable in game 3 as well. They win 190-80, 210-70, 140-90. And really, just to briefly talk on it, it was, I thought, a very strong performance kind of from the top lines of Detroit. I think on this show, when we've talked to our analysts about the Detroit games, we had some concerns about execution at times, kind of the fundamentals, specifically in the quad ball game. And things definitely seem to be clicking a little bit better on the offensive side. Cleveland was throwing some varied defenses at Detroit, and Detroit seemed to have a good amount of answers for them. Obviously, the beater matchups obviously played a big part as well. And Sue Ray Brador having very dominant in their minutes. Not a lot of control for Cleveland to play with, which is obviously going to add to sometimes a bit of a one-sided affair. And Detroit, to their credit, made that happen, winning the series 3-0. So I'm going to talk to beater and manager for the Detroit Innovators, Ray Brador. Ray, thanks so much for joining us tonight.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. So I guess my first question is, obviously you guys were coming off such a high season last year, the best finish in program history. But you guys are also a much younger team this time around, and bringing in a lot of new players, a lot of young faces that are still developing from the Michigan State programs, and the Grand Valley program as well, here and there. So kind of, how have you guys kind of looked at this season as a whole? What was kind of your barometer for success, and how do you feel like you guys have met that or not met that over the course of 12 games or 9 games?
Yeah. So I think our coaching staff has done a really good job recognizing that, like you said, our team is a lot younger this year around. We're also a lot smaller. And so trying to really balance getting experience and playing opportunities for those younger players. And they've done a lot of mix and matching with the lines throughout the various series. And so they try to balance having younger players playing with older talent who can maybe guide them and direct them a little bit. And then depending on the games, they've done different versions of trying to play through everyone and making sure that everyone is getting good quality reps. And whether that means a lot of playing time with new players or working with different partners, or if that means, for example, in the Chicago series, we had some games where we didn't play as much depth just because we wanted to really make sure that when people were getting minutes, those minutes were high quality, that you were reaping the benefits of that play time. And I think the coaches have done a really good job balancing, trying to get competitive opportunities for more senior players while also trying to highlight and build progress as for younger players and the whole team.
So kind of talk to us about the dynamics for people who might not know anything about kind of the state of Michigan quadball right now. The dynamics between, those more senior and younger players. Is there a lot of interaction between some of the club players and the schools? Obviously, like we said, this team largely feeds out of the Michigan program and the Michigan State program. So what does that kind of all look like, not only during the MLQ season, but kind of in the kind of annual sense?
Yeah, I want to really shout out my first year playing MLQ. I felt like all of the college teams were very insular. We didn't really interact with each other as much. And one thing that I think my first year on Detroit really did was kind of build bonds between specifically MSU and U of M, because the following years we would do exhibition tournaments, joint practices, stuff like that, all throughout the USQ season. And as a result, I think it's made it a lot easier for us to feel comfortable giving each other advice, whether it's you're a more senior player on Michigan or on Michigan State talking to someone from the other team. I think playing MLQ has really helped build those connections because we're interacting with each other more at tournaments. We're interacting with each other more just throughout the whole school year. I also think that now, having had some alumni from Michigan who are still in the area, specifically Ryan Sue and Rob Butler, who are both putting in a lot of effort to really keep the Michigan program thriving. So Ryan had coached last year, and I know that both of them attended multiple practices throughout the year and really helped make sure the program stayed competitive, and also worked with Michigan State. And I know David Banis also does the same thing for Michigan State, making sure that they have new and younger talent and are really trying to recruit. And I think having that mix of club players who are willing to invest in those college programs really helps create a streamlined situation for MLQ, where people are familiar with each other, they're comfortable with each other, and it really makes the coaching situation a lot easier.
Yeah, I think you've definitely reaped those fruits. I mean, back when I was in college, Michigan was an extremely insular program, kind of famously so.
Yeah.
You guys have obviously come a very long way in that regard. I'm going to kind of go back a little bit because We haven't been able to talk to anybody from the Innovators all season. I think you guys ended up being the only team with a standing conflict of practice on Tuesdays when we went to talk to you guys.
Yeah, I'm actually missing practice right now. I couldn't go just because it was too long of a drive and I worked kind of late today, but they are in fact practicing today. So
exactly. So you guys started off in the Minneapolis series. That's correct, right? That was your first series.
Yep.
Right? And they obviously beat you guys 3-0, but the games were actually like fairly competitive. So like, what was the kind of vibe for the team coming out of that series?
Coming out of that series, I think we felt really good. One thing I really want to highlight was our defensive abilities against Minneapolis. So they had, if you look at like the analytics statistics for like teams on MLQ's website, you can see that they had no fast breaks against us throughout the entire series. So we were really good on defense, making sure we had at least dodgeballs or chasers on defense. We also were able to keep the score much lower than previous times playing that team where like my first year on Detroit, I think we got like completely blown out by them. So I really think that it highlighted the amount of work we put in the practices leading up to Minneapolis, trying to kind of figure out how they were scoring and what we can do on defense to prevent that. I think it also highlighted where we needed to grow as a team and how we could work on our offense to score specifically in like a half court setting. And I think we tried to implement that a lot more against like Toronto, Chicago, and then most recently Cleveland.
It's funny you mentioned the analytics stats. It's kind of something I want to talk to you about kind of the core of, I guess you're all Michigan alumni now, but I'm talking yourself, Ryan Sue, Jack Levy, who obviously is a coach for New York now. Because not a lot of people are talking about stuff like that in quadball. And I remember a few years back at a U.S. Quadball Cup, walking by Michigan, and it looked like you guys were like hosting a classroom. It was the Round Rock one. A bunch of people were sitting on a brick wall. Like there were two people like at the front of the class. So I guess kind of what has kind of driven you guys to, I mean, I'm a quadball nerd. Like you don't have to sell me on why you would do it, but like what kind of drove you guys to kind of take this view of quadball to kind of be so, strategy driven, analytics driven, and kind of what has been your guides to that point to get there? Because I mean, obviously you say veteran, you guys are still really, really young.
I think me, Ryan, Jack, like the three people you highlighted, we're probably the worst people to ask this question about because the three of us have had like multiple hour-long like phone calls, conversations in various iterations just about like quadball and really breaking down stuff at a niche level, right? I think generally for Michigan, the influence a little bit was the first time we really did that like teacher at the front of the class situation was when we were trying to make like a finals run, and we finished in the semifinals back in Philadelphia. And that kind of, at least for me, the following year, I was still in charge of the team. And I thought it was a really effective way to try and like make sure people were on the same page, especially day of nationals. I think it's really good to have that sort of like insular, like we're a team, we're all working together. I want to hear like your input. And at the same time, we need to have a game plan. And it's good to have that for each team because then you know what to focus on and it's a little less chaotic. I think that kind of method of teaching and those analytics have really carried over into MLQ, especially because there are statistics to work with. Like Ryan is on the stats team. And because of that, he watches all of our film so much. And so he really gets a sense of like, okay, here are the things that we can work on. Here are the things that we're consistently messing up. And I think that definitely plays a part in both what he brings up to the other coaches and then how they try and implement new strategies for us as a team.
Awesome. So again, veteran, younger players, you can say what you want. I'll have my own judgment on what that means. But talk to me about some of the younger players that have really started to make a difference for this team over the course of the summer.
Yeah. I know the Michigan people best, so I really want to highlight like Anna Klein because this was her first year ever playing USQ, and this is her first ever season doing MLQ, and she's really grown a lot as like a player. Like you can tell that her positioning is better. She's making cuts at the right time. There's still a lot of room for growth, but just that willingness to even make mistakes and put yourself out there. I mean, she even started game 1 against Cleveland, which is a lot of pressure, I think, to put on someone who this is their first ever year playing. And I think she's really lived up to that expectation throughout the course of the season. In terms of like MSQ players. I know like Gwen is only 1 or 2 years younger than me, but they are consistently a stellar player, and they have really put in, them and Julian have both put in a lot of minutes as like not just chasing but also beating for different series. And so because of that, we're really seeing a lot more utility players, both with them, Chris, Jane, Levi. They're all kind of going back and forth between different games. And I think that shows a lot of flexibility in both their skills and a lot of growth throughout the season, just from what I've seen at practice, how they're able to kind of learn what mistakes are different between beaters and chasers and stuff like that.
Awesome. So we've taken a long curvy road to the actual series that you're on here to talk about today. Obviously, you guys get the sweep against Cleveland this weekend. You guys, it always seems to come down to you and Cleveland in some way or another, somewhere in the North Division, whether it's like, somewhere in the middle, kind of towards the bottom, slightly towards the top like you guys were last year. Does this series like hold a little, and there's obviously back when you guys had a few more club players, there were a lot of like club players who played together all season during USQ and then play against each other. So does this series kind of have that like kind of fun little rivalry feel for you guys?
At least for me personally, I think it definitely does. I know for sure for other like older players, they definitely felt that rivalry. And I think we've kind of instilled it a little bit in like the younger generation. For me personally, I remember my first ever season of MLQ playing Cleveland, because that was back when we still had the split North Division. That was the first time that I played a team that wasn't just kind of completely trashing us. And so it was good to feel competitive and actually have like sort of meaningful minutes where I could learn and grow as a player instead of just being like, wow, this feels terrible, right? And so that has kind of, and then the following year we dropped a game to Cleveland, right? And so I think that has really built up this rivalry, at least for me, that it's like, it's an intense thing. It usually decides who gets to go, at least historically decided who got to go to champs versus who didn't. And so there was a lot of pressure always. This year, the pressure was off a little bit, but it still definitely determines like bracket seedings, difficulty of schedule at MLQ champs. So it was still a very meaningful series. I also think it's just fun to play with the Cleveland people, especially now we have people like Chris and Trevor who play with some Cleveland players throughout the USQ season. So I think you get a little more of kind of this friendly rivalry being built up throughout.
For sure. So you guys kind of really blitzed them out hard in that first game and kind of set the tone early. Obviously, you and Ryan had a very strong shift on, with dodgeball control. You guys also were able to convert that into goals in the quadball game, which is something that even at times this regular season, when you guys have had that dodgeball control, hasn't always happened. So what's been kind of some of the stressors on kind of getting that offense working a bit more effectively as you guys have moved on in the year?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that the coaches have really tried to been highlighting in us throughout practice is just that coordination between beaters and chasers. Because like you said, you can have control, but if you're not working well with the people who can actually score, you're not going to get anywhere, right? So we've worked on different like calls that we can make to try and be like, hey, this is their game plan going in for scoring. And also just really trying to make sure that our communication is up, because that's something that helps you across the board, but especially on offense is super beneficial, just because it's like, oh, if you can hear me and see that I'm giving you this tap on this side, that's a lot easier to score than versus like passing away, or maybe I'm not paying attention to a chaser who's getting pressured, right? So I think really working on that synergy between chasers and beaters has been kind of our biggest focus.
Yeah, I think like Cleveland kind of came out right away, broke out like a triangle one against you guys, and I've seen a lot of teams, I'm not going to mention names, just like ignore the fact that there's a triangle, like because they were like, hey, Loose loves to cut, we're not going to let Loose cut, and a lot of teams would just ignore that and like leave Loose on an island. You guys were immediately over there, making those tap beats. So definitely what you're talking about, kind of using that chaser beater interactions. In the beater game, obviously some players Cleveland, has had, a number of years might be generous. They're a very young team, much like you guys. But obviously some players kind of joining the team in more recent years. Adam Thompson's a player that I think kind of coming out of the Case Western program, which I think is one of the really great stories of, in quadball in recent years in the college game, at least. So what's it been like playing against them and kind of how they've been growing as a competitor for you guys?
Yeah. I mean, this was the first time I ever played against Adam Thompson, and they definitely left an impression on me. Like I remember like who they were, what they were doing. I was like, okay. And I thought they did a really good job free beating and kind of applying pressure. But at the same time, I'm very familiar with at least some of the other beaters from Cleveland who I've matched up against like year after year, both throughout like college and then MLQ just every single season. And so I think having that level of comfort, knowing how to play against some of these players, really makes it a lot easier to kind of know like, oh, I'm feeling confident, I'm feeling comfortable, and I know that I can execute the things that I want to execute and kind of communicate that to my team.
You mentioned kind of knowing the players. Obviously, a lot of hype around Joe Lombardi earlier in the season. He got a Player of the Week when they beat Toronto. Everyone knows he's a shooter for sure. Was there any pregame strategy of like, hey, if Lombardi's got, because I saw you guys were doing a very good job of jumping in those shooting lanes. You're quadball players, obviously.
Yeah, I think we did a lot of practice both with our 2-2 and our hoops defense, and a lot of the stress really was on making sure that we can watch those shots and then trying to understand like how does the rest of the defense really need to adapt if you're shutting down those shooting opportunities. How do you make sure that they're not scoring in other ways? Cleveland's got really creative, especially games 2 and 3. They started going for like pushes off of hoops, quick like taps and shots, and trying to really figure out how we could adjust that. You can kind of see live in game 3 how both the beaters and the chasers had to adjust to that and how we had to change our communication styles to really make sure that we were effective on defense, both at stopping Joe Lombardi, but also people like Fiona Gaffney from cutting and stuff like that.
For sure. So kind of looking forward, obviously you guys get the third place. So you're in a pretty good spot in the lower bracket. Obviously some very, very talented teams down there with you guys, Washington, Houston, and Charlotte. As well as this Cleveland team that you guys just played. What's kind of the outlook? What's kind of the vibe going into championships? What is kind of, as far as you can tell, like Innovators considering a successful championship?
I mean, I think for us, a successful championship is very similar to what we've been trying to achieve all season long. It looks like getting quality playing opportunities for the people who have invested a lot of time, a lot of money, and effort into this program. So it's making sure that we're giving them those quality reps and making sure that we're staying competitive at the same time, because, we do spend all of this time building up to MLQ championship. And we want to make sure that at the end of the day, we are prioritizing staying competitive, trying to beat these other teams, while also making sure that our players are able to develop individually and really feel like they're reaping the benefits of the effort they've put in all season.
Awesome. Well, Ray, thank you so much for taking the time today. I'm excited to watch you guys play at championships, and best of luck on the weekend.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, and I look forward to seeing you there.
Well, that will do it for another episode of MLQ Replay. Like we said, the regular season in the books. All that's left to do is championships. Championships will get started with the lower bracket, which the Innovators will be competing in at 8:30 a.m. on Saturday. That will run through to, I believe, about 3:30 p.m. on Saturday. Quarterfinals will run from 3:30 until the evening. And then on Sunday, we will have the semifinals alternating straight into the finals. On pitch 2 on Sunday, we will have Next Gen, chance to watch some of the young players who played on the practice squads for teams compete. And then on Monday, we have Take Back the Pitch, which will also be streamed on the MLQ Network, which is a great event as well. We hope you guys tune in all weekend. We'll be bringing you all kinds of coverage. We're really excited about the setup we're going to be doing and the coverage we're going to be bringing. Of course, you can check out our other shows in the week. I'm sure Tea Time's got something coming out in a couple days. But yeah, as always, thank you guys all for watching. Thanks to Kenny Murphy for taking the time, Ray Brodora as well. Thanks to Miguel Esparza, our producer.